Mornings used to be our thing, me and Mason. The way he'd run barefoot across the kitchen tile, chasing the smell of pancakes, calling them circle clouds. I never corrected him. Why would I? That morning, like so many before it, started with his laughter and my tired smile. He sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs under the chair, still in dinosaur pajamas. I flipped another pancake and glanced at the clock, 8:03 a.m. He had 15 more minutes before school. Mason hated being rushed, and I had learned to build in buffer time. 6 years old, and already the center of my world. I poured his orange juice. He made a face, too pulpy, Mom. I sipped it to show him it was fine. He giggled. That's how we worked, small negotiations that made mornings feel like home. But even with his voice echoing through the house, a quiet lived in the corners. The kind that doesn't speak but presses on your shoulders. My phone buzzed with a voicemail. Mom again. I didn't listen. Her last message had been 20 seconds of disappointment, hidden behind words like concern and family. They lived 30 minutes away. It might as well have been the moon. When they did show up, it was for holidays, and even then, only long enough to comment on Mason's hair or how pale I looked. Lately, they didn't come at all. I washed the pan, staring out the window at the dogwood tree, already blooming early for spring. I hadn't heard from Charles in weeks, and honestly, that was a relief. Peace, however temporary, was something I held onto like breath underwater. But that morning, something shifted. I remember the way the floor creaked. Not from Mason, not from me. I turned. My parents stood at the door. No knock, no warning. Just there. Mason looked up from his cartoons, then back to the screen. They were dressed like it was Sunday service. Mom in a pressed blouse. Dad with that same leather watch he wore when he needed to speak like a man. Didn't expect you, I said, wiping my hands on a towel. We were in the area, Dad said. It was a lie. I could tell by the way his eyes avoided mine. He pulled something from his coat pocket, an envelope. This came for you. He set it on the table. I didn't reach for it right away. My hands trembled before they moved. The paper inside wasn't folded with care. It was clinical. Printed. Sealed by the county. Temporary guardianship petition. Filed by my parents. I read the words twice before I could understand them. Then once more just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. Maternal instability? I read out loud. My voice cracked. Are you kidding me? Dad looked at the floor. Mom glanced at the fridge, not me. You think I'm unfit? Because I make pancakes? Because I have a messy kitchen? Because I got tired of Charles's lies and finally left? Cassie, my mother said, quietly, this isn't about you. Isn't it? I snapped. You sided with him during the divorce. You thought I was unstable because I cried. Because I was tired. Because I didn't fake a smile through the court dates. It's about Mason's well-being, Dad said. That phrase, so polished, so sharp, sliced deeper than a curse. You're working with him, aren't you? I asked. Charles. No answer. I looked down at Mason, still oblivious, humming to the cartoon theme song. My voice lowered. I built my life back from nothing. And you, of all people, think I'd ever hurt him? No reply. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. Heavy. Unforgiving. Mason came running in with a toy car, smiling. "Look, Mommy! I made it fly!" I forced a grin. "That's amazing, baby. Go play in your room for a bit, okay?" He nodded, hugged my leg, and ran off. Then I turned back to them. "You used my own son as evidence?" My voice dropped. "How could you?" "It's not punishment," Dad said. "It's protection." The words didn't echo. They thudded. Final. Certain. They left shortly after. No hugs. No promises. Just the door closing behind them, soft but decisive. I sat on the couch, the envelope in my lap, staring at it like it might change if I looked hard enough. My throat burned. My eyes didn't water, they stung, but no tears came. I whispered to myself, they already decided who I am. That evening, I didn't make dinner. I lay next to Mason in his bed, brushing his hair with my fingers. He was half asleep when he mumbled, "You okay, Mommy?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just thinking." Truth was, I wasn't okay. But I had never been more clear. They didn't think I could fight. That was their mistake. They thought I'd break. But I wasn't bending this time. I kissed Mason's forehead, stood up, and went to the kitchen. I opened my laptop. I started typing. Every message, every receipt, every moment Charles made me doubt myself, I documented it all. Not for revenge. For Mason. Next morning, the sun hadn't even reached the windows when I heard it, an envelope sliding beneath the front door. I walked over, barefoot on cold tile, picked it up. This one was official. A custody summons. Signed by Judge Allen. The court date? Already set. This wasn't betrayal. This was war. I didn't know it yet, but the next time I'd see that judge, my 6-year-old son would be the one to change everything. I met with Miss Hargrove, my lawyer, the morning after the envelope came. She was older than me, sharp as broken glass, but steady. She looked over the paperwork, nodded once, then leaned back in her chair. "Don't react emotionally. You gather. Document. Stay ahead of the narrative." That was her word, narrative. As if my life had been boiled down to a storyline someone else was writing. Driving home, I stared out at the streets I'd driven since high school. Back then, I thought justice was something natural. Something that arrived when you were right. But the last few years had taught me, justice doesn't show up, it's dragged out, and usually by the one who yells loudest. Then came the text from my father. "We'd like to talk. Sunday at 4. Just the family." I didn't answer. But I knew I'd go. Not because I believed anything good would come from it. But because I needed to hear them say it. Out loud. I needed to watch their faces as they chose sides. Sunday came gray and still. I dropped Mason off with a friend, said I had an errand. I didn't tell him where I was going. He didn't ask. The drive to my parents' house was familiar, but every turn felt heavier. When I pulled into the driveway, the shutters were all closed. Curtains drawn. Like they were preparing for a funeral. I stepped inside without knocking. The air smelled like lemon polish and forced hospitality. Dana was already there, sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed. She didn't look at me. That told me everything. Charles stood by the fireplace. Too relaxed. He gave me a nod like we were acquaintances at a conference. "Cassie," my father said from his armchair, voice flat. Let's sit down. He had a notepad in his lap. I almost laughed. Of course he did. He opened with words like concerns and patterns of behavior. My mother sat beside him, hands folded, eyes down. The performance was tight. Rehearsed. Then Charles stepped forward and set a folder on the coffee table. This might help clarify, he said, as if we were in a PTA meeting, not discussing taking my son. Inside the folder, photos, notes, highlighted texts. Every outburst I'd ever had in print. Moments taken from months, even years ago. Missed calls from doctors' offices, a picture of my unmade bed, a screenshot of a group chat where I vented during a panic attack. My mother opened a list. She read slowly. You've let Mason sleep until 10 a.m. You forgot to pack his lunch twice last semester. You left him with a neighbor without calling us. Neglect, Charles said. Patterns. I stared at him, and something in my chest unclenched. You're really doing this, I whispered. Then Dana reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen, turned it to me, and pressed play. My voice came through first. Ragged, gasping. Me, mid-panic attack, months ago. Recorded without my knowledge, without my consent. I couldn't look at her. Why would you? I didn't know he'd use it like that, Dana muttered, almost too quiet to hear. I stood up. My chair didn't scrape. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. You've all been preparing for this, I said, scanning the room. You've got your files, your videos, your little intervention script. I see it now. This isn't about Mason. This is about controlling the narrative. And you've chosen the villain. No one moved. Good, I said. Now I know what I'm fighting. I walked out into the hallway. Dana followed, hesitantly. You're not scared of me, I said, low. You're scared of becoming me. She flinched. I left before she could respond. Back home, the house was quiet. I picked up Mason from the neighbors and brought him inside. He kicked off his shoes and ran to the kitchen for a juice box. Are we still going to Grandma's this weekend? He asked casually. I paused. Smiled. Not for a while, baby. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a drawing. It's us, he said proudly. I'm the little wolf. And you're the big one now. My throat tightened. I didn't let it show. I love it, I said. And I meant it. That drawing meant more than any affidavit ever could. After he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and slid the drawing into my journal. My phone buzzed. A message. From Dana. A screenshot. She had texted Charles hours earlier. I didn't know he'd use it like that. I'm sorry. The image was blurry, her face caught mid-regret. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe some betrayals don't last forever. And maybe some allies don't look like heroes. 2 days passed, and the silence settled over me like dust. I hadn't cried since that so-called family meeting. No yelling. No shaking. Just nothing. I'd gone through the motions, made Mason's breakfast, replied to emails, folded laundry that didn't need folding. There was something haunting about quiet tasks when your world had already cracked. I thought silence was peace. Turns out, it's just noise I hadn't learned to translate. I muttered as I scrubbed the counters yet again. I cleaned until the luster of the granite looked new, but the feeling underneath me stayed the same. A hum of pressure. Later, Mrs. Blevins knocked on my door. Her spoon of soup felt like both kindness and confirmation. "Some storms don't shout, honey," she said, with that look older women get when they've lived things most people avoid. "They hum. And you've got one singing through your walls." I nodded, offered a thank you, kept my mask on. If I cried in that moment, I felt she didn't notice. Maybe she didn't expect me to. When night came, I found myself pulling open an old box of Mason's papers. The fortress I'd built, proof of motherhood, proof of normal, was lined with spelling tests and soccer schedules. I unearthed a yellowed envelope with my father's handwriting. My breath caught. At 19 I had sworn I'd never come home again. I assumed that was because I was too broken, or because he didn't trust me. Neither were entirely true. I opened the letter. First line, "Cassie, I never learned how to love without trying to control." My father's voice on paper, not proud, not loud, just honest. He confessed the chain of unspoken commands, the legacy of silence. He wasn't writing to save me. He was writing so someone might read it. I understood, then, the quiet had been growing in generations, not in months. Tears came, slow, simple. Not for what happened, but for what I realized. The man I blamed wasn't a monster. He was a product. And I wasn't going to be one. I scribbled in my journal, "I will be the fracture in this inheritance." The next morning, I didn't ask for permission. I signed Mason up for the music camp he'd thrown his drawing of instruments into last week. The same family picture I kept on the wall? I took it down and slid it into the drawer. It wasn't a betrayal. It was reclamation. I called Miss Hargrove and asked, could letters count as evidence of manipulation? She said, if they show intent, they matter. I inhaled. I stored the letter in a secure folder. At dinner, Mason chose a puzzle piece shaped like a lightning bolt. "This one's the boss," he told me, placing it in the board. "It changes the picture." I laughed quietly. "So do you." I could feel him watching me. Feeling something shift. That night the phone rang. It was Charles. Calm. Too calm. "We need to talk custody, it's escalating." I didn't flinch. I said, then escalate it. When he hung up, the silence that followed chilled me to the bone. I woke up to an email from my father's law firm titled Family Trust Amendment. The headline alone squeezed the air out of me. Coffee in hand, I stared at the PDF. My name, deleted. Rowena's, inserted as sole decision-maker for Mason's health and schooling. My pulse slowed, then raced. I flipped back through papers I'd signed months ago, just routine, I'd thought. After Mason's preschool incident, I signed an unnamed form, trusting them not to sabotage me. Now I understood the depth of the betrayal. My father had drafted this contract when I assumed I still belonged. Rage simmered just beneath the calm I forced. The morning quiet shattered. Later, we attended the Vale Family Foundation Gala. At the podium, Rowena thanked our community's strong mothers, with Mason by her side, smiling like nothing was wrong. I stood at the back, an outsider in my own hometown. Old classmates passed me with cautious glances. One whispered, "Is she still with them?" I clenched my teeth and remembered, the sweetest lies are wrapped in family dinners. Their unity mask cracked tonight. The spotlight wasn't just on Rowena, it was on the family's version of the truth, the version I refused to accept. Humiliation mingled with determination in the evening air. By the next morning, Garrett called. They've filed for a preliminary hearing, maternal instability, financial concerns. The legal system I once thought of as protection had doubled as a shield for them. Twist, the contract and this filing weren't separate, they were parts of the same plan. I realized I needed more than love, I needed proof. Fear buzzed like a warning but morphing into clarity. I steered my car, sunlight slicing through the windshield, thinking, they gave me life, but not my story. Over lunch, I sketched a path, collect Mason's artwork, record his voice, save the evidence of our bond. I texted Truman, I might need help accessing old server logs from the gala. He responded fast. I picked up speed mentally and emotionally, preparing quietly for battle. That night, I parked outside home, Mason asleep inside with the porch light still on. I reached for the front door key and froze. Through the glass I saw Rowena slipping down the hallway toward Mason's room, a folder in hand. Heart pounding, I didn't move. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I'd stay silent. Tonight, I decided I wouldn't. I walked into the Westbrook Elementary Gymnasium with a mixture of determination and unease. Parent-teacher night, supposed to be a simple evening, felt loaded tonight. I wasn't here to entertain small talk or reassure anyone. I was here with Mason, representing us in full view. I found the table they had placed for me, between Rowena and Charles. I paused before sitting down, glanced at the banner overhead, Family Matters, Community Cares. It stung. The whispers began right away. Parents whose faces I recognized nodded, exchanged glances. Custody issues, someone muttered just loud enough. My throat tightened. I took a breath. I gave Mason a reassuring smile, let's make the rounds, buddy. I tapped into the calm I'd built. I wasn't going to shrink. When the Q&A part started, Charles stood. He cleared his throat and said, parenting is a shared responsibility. Some of us know what balancing two households means, don't we, Cassie? The audience shuffled. My cheeks heated. He implied what I already knew they thought, I was unstable. I took the mic. I looked each person in the eye. Raising a child isn't a burden, unless you're carrying someone else's lies with you, I said. Silence fell. Charles's smile flickered. A few phones glowed. I stood there, voice steady. I felt the shift. For the first time I didn't look like the other woman in their story. I looked like someone wronged. After the meeting, I stepped into an empty hallway. Mason's art teacher, Ms. Benning, appeared behind me. She held a folder. His classwork, she said. He talks about you like you're his compass. My heart lodged in my throat. I accepted the folder. I can write the letter, she added, about your presence. I don't buy the version they're selling. I nodded. Thank you. She slipped away quietly. I looked at the folder, titled Silent Support. I realized that not all belief was visible. Some alliances form quietly. A spark of hope warmed me. Later that night, I pulled into the driveway. The dusk air was heavy. Charles stood at the curb, arms folded. He watched me. I parked, cut the engine, and stepped out. You know the court date is set, Cassie, he said. We can still settle this quietly. His tone had that old confident shade, the kind designed to press you back into place. He glanced at the car seat where Mason sat asleep. Supervised visitation. Until you prove you're emotionally stable. My chin lifted. You've mistaken my silence for surrender. I was never yours to control. He smirked and said, well then, let the war begin. He walked off into the dark. I stayed with the engine running, hand on the horn, but I left it silent. Inside, I walked by the kitchen counter and paused. There it was, the origami wolf Mason made weeks ago, folded neat and proud. I thought I'd lost it. I picked it up. My voice lowered, Mommy's not backing down. I placed it on my desk beside the folders, prints of Mason's drawings, voice memos of him saying Mommy. I printed, I labeled, I organized. This wasn't messy resistance. It was purposeful. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A disguised voice said, "You don't know everything about your son's school records. Be careful what you dig up." I held the phone as the silence stretched, heavier than the threat. And just like that, I whispered, the war I thought I was starting had already started without me. My phone light woke me early, text from an unknown number, "Your son's backpack was swapped yesterday at school." My stomach dropped. I got Mason ready and drove to Westbrook Elementary. The receptionist tried to soothe me, but I could see the lock of the office window. "Security footage?" "I need to see it," I said firmly. The admin said, "Policies apply." That was enough. I checked Mason as soon as class ended, his backpack bulging oddly. Inside was an envelope marked Med Notes. I ripped it open. It contained doctored psychiatric records that portrayed me as negligent. I sank against the wall, rage and fear jumbled. They planted evidence. I realized I was about to cross a line, not just for Mason's sake, but in reclaiming my story. That afternoon I drove to the community park. The Vail Family Foundation's banner fluttered high, empowering families. Rowena stood at the podium, Mason by her side. I kept to the edge of the crowd, listening as volunteers passed flyers, standing in for the absent. I watched Rowena speak of motherhood like it was a wardrobe she wore without ever facing the mirror. My anger fired. I walked to the stage, took the mic. "Absent?" "I'm right here," I said. Rowena lunged to grab the mic from me. Phones raised. The crowd gasped. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "It's not absence if you're forced out. It's erasure." Flashlights blinked. My voice startled even myself. The tension rode high. I walked off the stage and held my ground. I was not the quiet victim, this was open defiance. By evening the park video was all over my phone. Messages came from strangers, "Hang in there, we see you." Ms. Benning called, "You've always been present. Don't let them muddy that." I saved every clip, every comment, every screenshot. I called Garrick, "We need an emergency injunction, defamatory psychological claims." He scheduled it. I sat at the kitchen table with Mason asleep, browsed the evidence and thought, my name isn't dirt to drag through the mud. I feel solid, like a tree holding steady in a windstorm. Later that night the doorbell rang. I opened the peephole. Charles, drunk, staggered in the driveway, shouting, "This is what you wanted, huh?" He stumbled, knocked over Mason's bike, broke the handlebar bell my son loved. I didn't go outside to argue. I opened the door and faced him calmly. "Every time you push harder, you prove my point," I said. He reeled, lost his voice. Neighbors watched. The cops arrived. He slurred excuses. I shut the door. I felt the shift, the narrative was cracking, on their lawn, in broad daylight. The war had started. I wasn't waiting to be pulled in. I was stepping forward. The courthouse smelled like old wooden nerves. I sat in the waiting room, Mason's small hands resting in mine. He looked up and whispered, "Mommy, are you brave today?" I smiled at him, though my throat felt tight. "I think so," I said. The courtroom doors opened, and the air inside felt colder than outside. Rowena and Harlan sat in the front row, pressed and polished like a magazine cover. Their lawyer nodded toward them, a silent performance of power. But I wasn't the same woman who used to shrink under that look. I carried a thick folder, every letter, every message, every small piece of truth I'd collected. When Garrick stood, he moved with quiet precision. He presented the folder labeled silent support, the teacher's notes, neighbors' statements, even Mason's artwork of wolves standing side by side. I saw Harlan lean toward Rowena, whisper, "This is her final shot." I caught it. And for the first time, I realized they were nervous. I was the storm now, and they knew it. When the recess bell rang, I stepped into the hallway to breathe. Across the corridor, a news screen flickered with a headline, Vale Foundation names Rowena Vale Mother of the Year. Her face glowed beneath the studio lights. I didn't feel envy, just the absurd humor of it. A trophy for the woman trying to erase me. I thought about how people mistake applause for virtue. Recognition from the wrong crowd wasn't worth the weight of my child's love. When the court resumed, the reporter in the back mentioned the award again. I raised my hand, calm but clear. Does that title mean you can take a child away from his mother? The room froze. The judge looked over his glasses, Rowena's practiced smile cracked, just slightly. For the first time, silence favored me. By noon, it was my turn. Garrick handed me the floor. I opened my own folder, the letter from my father, the original contract with my forged signature, the photographs Rowena had edited for her narrative. I walked the court through each one, not with anger, but with precision. These weren't mistakes, I said. They were choices. Every page I turned felt lighter. Harlan looked away, Rowena's fingers trembled on the table. I stopped asking for mercy that day. I started presenting evidence. The judge's eyes met mine, neutral, but engaged. The tide had begun to move. After court, the lobby buzzed with low voices. I overheard a woman whisper, "She's been there all along." A man beside her nodded. I didn't look back, but I heard their words settle like soft rain after months of drought. Mason sat on a bench drawing quietly, a little wolf with a smaller one beside it. He handed me the sketch. "That's us," he said. I ran my fingers over the paper, tracing the lines. "You're right," I whispered. Outside, Truman texted, "You broke the narrative." I didn't reply, I didn't need to. Some victories don't need witnesses, they just need to be lived. The afternoon sun hit the courthouse steps as we walked out. Garrick gave me a nod, half smile, half warning. "It's not over till it's in ink," he said. As if on cue, a clerk rushed out, handing me a sealed envelope. "The judge asked this be delivered to you directly," she said. I opened it in the car while Mason hummed softly beside me. The page inside was blank, no ruling, no signature. Just a note typed in small letters, verdict pending. My heart didn't sink this time. The tide had turned, but the shore hadn't revealed its shape yet. I watched Mason in the rearview mirror, sunlight on his cheek, and thought, whatever comes next, I've already found my footing.
I got to the courthouse before the doors even opened. The air smelled faintly of rain and dust, that scent old buildings never shake off. I wore the same muted blue suit from my first hearing. Mason once told me it made me look unbreakable. Maybe he was right. Garrick met me by the steps, briefcase in hand, his expression all business until he saw the sealed letter I was holding. From him, he asked quietly. I nodded. He wanted the judge to have it. He didn't ask what was inside. Some things didn't need explanation. Across the hallway, Charles paced, tapping his watch. Harlan leaned against the wall, smug like a man watching a show he'd already decided the ending to. Rowena stood a few feet away, hands clasped, eyes fixed on a point somewhere above my shoulder. None of them spoke to me. It was almost peaceful, like the quiet before a verdict you've already made peace with. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. This was never about winning. It was about being heard. When the judge entered, the room settled. Papers shuffled, chairs creaked, breaths caught. Then something unexpected. She looked down at Mason, who was sitting still beside Garrick, and said gently, "Young man, would you like to say something before we close?" My heart stuttered. Coming back home felt different this time. The door clicked shut behind me, and the silence that greeted us wasn't heavy. It felt honest. I walked through the rooms where I had once tiptoed and worried, and now they held me instead of pushing me down. My old bedroom. Same wallpaper, same curtains, but I saw it with new eyes. That dresser where I used to hide, the corner I used to avoid. It all felt reclaimed. Mason rummaged through his toy chest and pulled out a birthday card I'd saved. "Mom," he said quietly, "did you really keep all my little things?" I nodded, hugged him tight. "You kept me going," I told him. For a moment I let myself feel that, not just relief, but reconnection. I wasn't going back to what was broken. I was stepping into what could be built. While unpacking some boxes, I found it, my mother's handwriting on an envelope. I recognized it immediately. Her script was familiar from childhood notes that never meant much until now. Inside was a letter she wrote years ago. "I feared I'd already lost you," she began, and didn't know how to fix it. She confessed how she felt ashamed of our family's image, how control had been her attempt at love, and how she always thought her silence protected us but instead divided us. The words hit me not with anger, but with release. I let the tears come, not for the damage, but for the letting go. You don't always get an apology, I thought, but sometimes you get the truth. It wasn't about forgiving her entirely, though I did. It was about forgiving myself for believing their version and accepting mine. Later that afternoon, Mason sat at the kitchen table drawing. He sketched 2 stick figures holding hands. "Mom and me, our new house," he told me. I looked closer. He added a little porch and wrote underneath, "Can we paint it blue? Like your favorite mug." My heart settled into something calm and hopeful. Right then I got a call from Garrick. The court issued the official order. "You're clear." "All of it." A quiet smile passed across my face. I whispered to myself, "I'm not what they called me. I'm what I became in spite of them." In that moment I felt something shift. Not victory in the way I once imagined, but possibility, growth, and partnership with my son. In the evening, I volunteered at the community center program, helping parents who had been told they weren't enough. I shared parts of my story, but not to relive the hurt. I talked about finding my voice again. After I spoke, an older woman approached and said, "I thought I was too old to change, but you remind me it's never too late." Her words settled around me like warm earth. I realized then, what I once hid had become something someone else could climb on. My story wasn't just survival. It was a ladder. Night came, and Mason climbed into bed. He asked, "Can you tell me a story, Mom?" I tucked him in and said softly, "How about the one where the little boy and his mom changed their whole world?" He smiled and closed his eyes. I sat in the dark, looked at the moon through the window and thought, in the stillness of that night, I began the story. Not of what we escaped, but of what we built.